So welcome everyone. Thanks very much for coming. My name's Jill Fox and I'm a voter. Laugh now, right? And I'm here to moderate this really interesting program, Voting for Revolution. So you're all in the right place. But if you were looking at your program, this doesn't exactly look like the program, and we have had some changes. Two of our panelists came down with the flu. We're very sorry to hear that, and very glad that they're not here infecting the rest of us. But we have had two subs who have come in on very short notice, who were coming to this anyway, and so it's even more incumbent on all of you to participate. So I will introduce all of them in just a moment. And I did want to first introduce myself. I am the outreach manager for the San Francisco Department of Elections. San Francisco is a city and a county. We've been bringing democracy to San Francisco since 1878. And in 3 languages since 1978. I have not worked there the whole time. And in the next 75 minutes, we're going to have a conversation about how social revolutionaries become engaged voters. That's our goal. And when I say conversation, I mean it. Based on the theme of our entire conference, this is going to be about building partnerships for a stronger democracy, right? That's what we're all here for. So howdy partners, we are all in this together. This will be a conversation. So our map will be, you're going to listen to me for 5 minutes, and then we're going to hear from each of these panelists for about 10 minutes each. And then it's your turn to ask questions, engage in conversation for about 25 minutes, and then each of us will have a closing thought before we all go to lunch together. So that's what we're doing. We also have a wonderful timekeeper. Thank you, Sylvia. She will be keeping time for us. So to introduce, and as I just told these folks, names, I'm not really very good at names. If I were really good at names, I would be an elected official instead of an elections official. So forgive me all. But here today are community mobilizers, Jay Jordan and Rachel Dixon. Jay Jordan, Rachel Dixon, and Angelica Pena. And I will give them more details before each of them speaks, and also a fellow elections official, Aaron Neveris. And then for a moment, can we get to know who all of you are? Like all of them, you will see that we all wear many hats, so you can raise your hand several times in this little grouping. But I'm wondering, are there other elections officials in the room? Okay, so we have some elections officials. Do we have members of the media here? Media and social media, great. We're all partners. Do we have people here from community-based organizations? Okay, so we get kind of a sense of who's in the room. Very good. Anybody else here a voter? All right, see, we have common things too. And I'm from San Francisco, down here in Los Angeles. Any other Northern Californians here? Okay, and Southern Californians. Okay, great. So we get a sense of who's who. It's nice to meet you all. And now I'm going to tell you about my problems, which I'm guessing for other elections officials are common problems. We're talking about revolutions here. San Francisco has been home to a few revolutions over the years. We had in 1934, we had a waterfront strike, a very bloody, horrible riot, violence. It was a revolution. And what has come out of that in a very condensed form is a very, very strong and pervasive union strength in our city and throughout the West Coast. But very, very dominant from revolution to engagement in the social process. In the 60s, the free speech movement, easy for me to say, civil rights, anti-war demonstration, including at San Francisco State. Of course, Berkeley, more people heard about it, but also right in San Francisco, that had heavy influence on the 26th Amendment to give 18-year-olds the right to vote. I personally got to vote that year, so it means a lot to me. So that was a social revolution that became part of our social engagement. In San Francisco, of course, the gay movement was very important. It went from a social movement to a disaster movement to a civil rights movement. And they are also a very strong influencer of our politics and our decision making in San Francisco. So we're very steeped in that here, but there are movements all over this state and of course all over this country that define revolution, or perhaps another term, more like social evolution. Revolution to me has a bit of a violent streak to it, so sometimes we're talking also about social evolution. So despite all of that, we still have problems getting people to vote in San Francisco. I have 450,000 registered voters, but according to the ACLU, I have 195,000 people in San Francisco, which we all think of as very, involved citizenship. 195,000 eligible but not registered voters, right in my little town. In the last statewide election, November 2014, San Francisco had 53% voter turnout, which on a state average of 42, we think we did well, but really half of San Francisco didn't vote for governor. So, is that good enough? I don't know. So my theme for 2016 in San Francisco, even before I knew about this conference, is engaged the unengaged. So that's what all these folks are going to help me get my job done this week and this year. And you are all going to help too with your brilliant ideas during the question and answer session. So without further ado, in my messy notes, I will introduce our panelists to begin to solve all of our problems here. When we get to the question and answer session, if you're shy, feel free to write it down and pass me a note, and I will ask the question for you if you're not comfortable speaking in front of a crowd. So up first, to help us learn how to get people from the soapbox to the ballot box, or perhaps from the blog to the ballot box, who did we decide wants to go first? Mr. Jordan. He is going to talk about youth vote and other people who may be feeling disenfranchised, and they're going to get out the vote. Given the flexible nature we have up here, can you go ahead and just each be prepared to introduce yourselves, since I don't have background on everyone. So thank you, Jay, for speaking first. Take it away, Jay.
Thank you, Futures of California, for inviting me to this event. One of my favorite, how long do I got, 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
All right, cool. One of my favorite philosophers is Socrates, and he gave long speeches, and they killed him for it, so I'll be brief. So I'm Jay Jordan. I work for California for Safety and Justice. We are the organization affectionately known for writing Prop 47 and running the campaign. A ballot initiative, as you guys know, that gained over 60% of the vote in an election that seen the historical 20-year low. It speaks to some of the intentionality behind the voting. As networks manager, I manage the entire CJ network of about 150 organizations working in the criminal justice system in one form or fashion. So it's always good to hear about what the good folks on the ground are doing. It's what's most important. I guess I'll start out by saying This panel is called Voting for Revolution, and I just want to define revolution for a minute. Revolution to me is a process, right? It's not an end goal. It's a vehicle to get to where you're going. So, I would say, the people that I roll with, we vote for liberation because that's what we're trying to get to, right? And revolution is how we get there. Or social evolution is how we get there. The three things I would like to highlight in my opening is the fact that we have a large population of people who don't vote, not because they don't want to vote or they don't know their polling place or whatever, they don't think they can vote. We have 300,000 people, close to 300,000 people that are on probation that can vote. At any given time, we have 80,000 people in jails. 60% of those individuals are awaiting trial that can vote, right? And all of the people that have been cycled in and out of the prison industrial complex, right, that are on the street now living their lives, that can vote. That's a large voting block that has been untapped. In Richmond, California, there's a group, the Safe Return Project in Cisco, under the umbrella of PICO, that they go to the jails every Friday, and they have this thing called Freedom Fridays, where they register people to vote. I think that's so empowering and so amazing to do that. And to keep that in mind, that there's a huge voting block of people that just don't think they can vote. Another voting block, I think that we discredit, and a lot of politicians discredit. I was a field director for a congressional campaign in 2014, and the millennial vote, right? Everybody born from 1980 to the year 2000. And I'm a millennial, right? There was a study that came out that called us the Snapchat generation. I don't have Snapchat, but I'm on Facebook actively, social media. And, we are a generation that votes based off of what affects us. So for us, it's not some abstract term that we're talking about. We're talking about true issues that affect people like me and people that I love. And these modern movements that we talk about aren't movements that the end goal does not affect us in our everyday lives. The movements that we are a part of are because our daily lives are shortened by systematic oppression. In Stockton, if you live in where I'm from, Stockton, California, if you live in the zip code 95206, your lifespan is 10 years shorter than if you live a mile away, right? So the movement for Black Lives in Stockton is directly involved or directly impacted by the very lifespan of these individuals that are fighting for this. So voting and civic engagement, for me, is just one tool that we can use for our liberation, right? Voting for me and for the people that I roll with is just one tool that we can use, and I'll say it again, for our liberation. And what does liberation mean, right? Liberation means that I can wake up and not fear that my name and my face will be on a t-shirt saying Justice for Jay, right? My liberation means that when I wake up, I don't have to worry about my little brother walking down the street and getting accosted by a gang member, or when I wake up, I know that I'll have a grocery store to go to down the street instead of a liquor store, right? In South Stockton, we have over a dozen liquor stores. And Stockton is not a big city, so we have over a dozen liquor stores in this concentrated area, right? But the only grocery store is 3 miles away. So liberation for me, right, is being able to give my nieces and nephews some fresh fruit, some fresh vegetables. And it may seem as simple as that, but there's a lot of impacted communities that is not a reality. We're living in 2016, and people can't walk down the street and get fresh vegetables and fresh fruit. Liberation for me means that, I got out of prison 4 years ago, right? And I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find my own house. I was denied housing. I owed the state $12,000, so I was in debt. I opened up a bank account, and as soon as I opened it up, I didn't understand that the Franchise Tax Board could garnish my wages and put a bank levy on my bank account. So I put $500 in there, which was a lot for me, and they took it. So how do you expect me, as an individual, returning to society that wants to be productive, that wants to be integrated back into society, that can't get a job, can't get housing, can't get government assistance, and I'm in debt. So liberation for me means that I can get my dignity back. I can live with integrity and stand on my own 2 feet. So when we talk about modern movements and how civic engagement plays in that, voting is just one way that I get my liberation. And for some people, revolution is a violent term. For others, it's the only way to get to where we need to go. So thank you.
Thank you so much. When we talked on the phone earlier this week, we also talked about getting the youth vote out. So hopefully we can get the 18 to 24-year-olds, another big population, important to me. I think important to all of us. They talked about it earlier this morning too. Even in San Francisco, our youth vote, in our last election, only 22% of registered voters 18 to 24 voted, 22%. So I would love to hear more of your techniques on how we get that group, as well as our formerly incarcerated, which is another big group that I know we try hard to reach out to, and I'd love to hear more techniques when we get into the question and answer on that. And I think I'm not alone in the room. I've seen nods. I have to give it to first to Rachel, who I think was driving here when she was asked to speak. So we are very impressed that she came out, and she brings a great amount of knowledge. She was going to be there telling us stuff, and now she's here. It's all a partnership. So if you would like to introduce yourself, give some background, and you have about 10 minutes to talk about civic engagement. Thank you.
My name is Rachel Dixon. I am the Director of Data and Targeting Strategy at Engage San Diego. We are a civic engagement table based in San Diego County, and we are affiliated with State Voices, which is a national organization. And normally they have state tables, but California is so large, as I'm sure you all know, that a state table wasn't really the best idea for California. So we have the only regional table that's part of State Voices. So what happens at a civic engagement table is we have partners, different organizations throughout the county of San Diego. Currently we have 12 partner organizations, and they range from like the big people like ACLU and Planned Parenthood to small organizations that are working with Somali refugee populations. So it's the whole gamut of who's in San Diego. We in San Diego just started the table in 2012. I came on board in 2014. Previously, before that, I was working in the government relations department at Planned Parenthood. So we, again, we have a diverse table, and most of the organizations at our table work individually in their communities. So what we do is we kind of try and the whole point is to make the voting, the demographic of the voting population reflect the demographic of the population that lives in those communities. So we're usually targeting what we refer to as the rising American electorate, which is young people, people of color, and women with a specific focus on single women. So we we kind of target those voters, and we coordinate together to go out into the population and get those people to vote. That's pretty much our whole goal, is to get people to vote and raise the voting percentage of the rising American electorate. All of our, we kind of, again, we try to work together, and we try to make it so that we're not all working in this one part of San Diego where everybody wants to be, but we're kind of, spreading ourselves out and making sure that we're not all stepping on each other's door or toes, and we're not all 10 organizations knocking on the same person's door over and over again. So, and a lot of our communities, or our organizations, they're working individually with their communities, so they're familiar with the people in their communities, and they're some of them are, they create like precinct captains or like church captains, and those people are then in charge of getting people in their church or in their neighborhoods to vote. So it's a much more personalized experience for the voters, or for our volunteers, or the communities that we're working with. And they're not just going to these people when it's an election year. They're working with these communities throughout the all the time. So even when it's not an election year, or when they're not just coming to them when they want something from them, when they're wanting them to vote for something. And again, we do primarily getting people to the polls, but we also a lot of times will pick up a ballot initiative that is important to our communities. I know we did work on Prop 47. We're also going to be working on some minimum wage stuff in San Diego. Yeah.
Great.
That's all I've got for right now.
Well, one of the, is that good? Sorry.
Yeah.
You're good?
Yeah.
I know in San Francisco, since about 2008, we've had a thing called a Voter Information Network, where I have a database of, I think I'm up to 396 community-based organizations. But I'd love to hear later about how I have them. I have contacts. I push out information, but I haven't quite made that partnership work two ways. So maybe we can talk about that too, because it's more than just collecting and pushing out information. I need to make sure that I'm giving the information that each of these organizations need, so that would be great. You had even shorter notice. I think you were here.
Yeah, I checked in on my microphone. Hello? Yes. I checked in, and then I was asked to speak on the panel. So I want to thank all of you for bearing, I think, with me, and I'm going to talk. My name is Angelica Peña. I am the California Deputy Director of Civic Engagement for Naleo Educational Fund. It's a very full title there. Naleo Educational Fund, for those of you who are not familiar with the organization, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization whose mission is to facilitate the full participation of Latinos in the American political process. We do that from citizenship all the way to public service. NALEO stands for the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. So we do have a membership arm to our organization. I specifically work in the Civic Engagement Department, which is a part of our 501c3 arm. And our department is primarily focused on working directly with the community. We have our ear to the ground. We engage with our community members, Latinos, on a day-to-day basis. We work with community partners. We are able to take everything that we learn in our day-to-day work and apply it to research and to better understand how Latinos are engaging in the American political process. And we're able to do that in a variety of ways. So I want to talk to everyone about two unique ways and spaces that we fill. The first one is through our research around what we've coined the Great Unengaged. Through support from the Irvine Foundation, we've been able to, for the last few election cycles, been able to do research and experiment to better understand the Great Unengaged. And when I say Great Unengaged, I'm talking about the nearly 10.1 million Latinos that are eligible to vote and are not. Both because they're either unregistered or they're registered but they're non-participants in the electoral process. We do that in a variety of ways. Our experiments and our research is primarily focused on phone canvassing. Our goal is to understand not just the barriers that Latinos face in turning out to the polls, but just the sentiment around voting and the culture. I think what we bring to the table is a lot of the cultural competency that we were able to learn from our community partners. So we do that in trying to understand a few things. One is the message. What is the message that's going to resonate best with this huge gamut of the electorate or the potential electorate that is not getting them there, right? So what is it that's not just, we know VRA, right? There are a lot of policy-related issues that are barring our community from getting to the polls, but what's the sentiment there? What are the cultural reasons that some of our community members aren't turning out? So we want to understand message. We also want to understand messenger. Maybe, we think about all the different ways that we can touch potential Latino voters, but who are those messengers? Are they family members? Is it media? Are they community leaders? Are they teachers? Are they elected officials? So that's the second part to what we're trying to understand. And then the third part is the medium. So is it media? Is it phone canvassing? Is it door-to-door knocking? Is it mail? Is it direct educational information that we're sending out? So we're able to do that thanks to the support that we get from the philanthropic field, and we've been doing that now for a few election cycles, and we hope to continue to do that into 2016. Our hope is that by packaging the information that we're learning about this political or about this electorate, we're able to turn that around and provide it to community organizations. We know that the great unengaged is an often overlooked and at times dismissed growing population. Every single day there are more Latinos who are going to be eligible to vote in the next election. So how do we ensure that we're not on the sidelines, that we're not getting completely ignored by candidates and issues, not because we don't matter, but because we all know the ROI on campaign funding is important. And if Latinos aren't turning out to vote, or this particular segment of the electorate isn't turning out to vote, how do we bring attention to them and better understand them so that people are investing in a communication strategy and an outreach strategy to target Latinos? So that's kind of a higher level of what we're doing in the Great and Engage, or what we've called the Great and Engage. I recommend all of you to visit our website, naleo.org/Great and Engaged. We have a fantastic tool that we've been able to develop through our research, research that we did with Latino Decisions, where you can actually enter the profile of the individual you want to reach. Latino, you can break it down by age, gender, education level, and then it'll turn that back around to you and ask you, do you want to mobilize them, or are you trying to register them to vote? And it'll actually give you a formula and tell you, this is the message that we found through our surveying and research that's most effective. This is the person who's best suited to deliver that message, and this is the best way to get that message to them. So I highly encourage you all to visit that. The second piece I wanted to talk about that isn't directly, or isn't elections, but is directly influencing how Latinos are turning out to vote. And that's the work that we're doing in our citizenship space. Year-round, our efforts are heavily concentrated on a growing lawful permanent resident population that is eligible to naturalize but isn't doing it. So these are potential voters who all they have to do is start that first step towards citizenship, and we can turn them around and make them voters. Back in November of this last year, we were able to start and launch a campaign that has received support from the California Community Foundation, but more specifically has brought together a key group of stakeholders that is unprecedented in this way. The first one being service providers. Naleo provides citizenship assistance services, but we're working with a steering committee of 4 other organizations who are experts in this arena, so we really know what the community needs and how to best serve them. The other is city and government officials. So this campaign is co-chaired by Mayor Eric Garcetti, Congressman Javier Becerra, County Supervisor Hilda Solis, and now the Mayor of Long Beach, Robert Garcia. And through the partnerships that we're able to establish with these government officials and these elected officials, we're able to get access to resources that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. And the third, and I think the largest component of this campaign and what makes it so unique is that we've been able to get all major Spanish media networks to promote citizenship under one banner. These are networks that on a day-to-day basis are competing, but have found a value in understanding that Latinos need to take that step towards citizenship in order to become civically engaged. So we've been working with these major media networks, and all the different components that I just mentioned are a huge part of that. The CBOs bring the expertise. We know what the community needs. We work with them on a day-to-day basis. Without the support of foundations, we obviously can't do this work every day. And then the city and county agencies and elected officials, like I mentioned, are able to provide us resources we otherwise don't have. But media is able to reach the masses, something that we as local nonprofit organizations are unable to do in the same way. So the campaign just recently launched in November. It's had tremendous success. We've had a lot of people, given the political environment that we're in now, of course, there's other factors that play into that, but we're able to really expand our capacity and increase bandwidth in a way that I don't think we've ever done before. And while I know this panel is specifically talking about movements, and while I can't say right in the same way that Jay has talked about it, we know from our research with the Great Unengaged that Latinos do civically participate, but not in the traditional ways that you think. We're involved in community groups, we're involved in our children's schools, we do things in a way that, are, I think, a part of our culture, but we aren't able to bridge that connection to voting just yet without continuing to do this research and seeing how this full cycle of participation plays a huge factor. I bring up citizenship because how do we fold in newly naturalized citizens to be active voters, but then turn around and turn that into a family event, right? How do we get the applicants we're serving around citizenship who feel like they've gained and earned this right to vote to turn that around and educate their children and families about the importance of voting? And so we really can't think about voting and just, okay, this, on election day 2016, this is how we're going to do it. But how do we work year round with all of these different partners to increase capacity, to educate our population, and to do what we feel we can learn to do best by continuing to learn? So I'm hoping that, those 2 points, if folks have questions after, I'm happy to discuss them, but I wanted to share with you kind of the work that we're doing and how closely it relates, while not in a direct movement way, how this can really turn into a huge movement, and the learning piece is such an important part of that.
Gee, just imagine had she had a few minutes to prepare her speech. That was
500 words a second, I know.
That was wonderful. In November 12, again, we're all here to solve my problems, but in November 12, there were 364,875 San Franciscans voted by LA standards, small group. But there were 51 of these people who were especially important to me. One was my then just turned 18-year-old son who voted for the first time. And the other 50 were a really interesting group that relates to what Angelica was saying. And that's that these were people who became citizens that day. And we do our citizenship ceremonies regionally. So they were in downtown Oakland. They became citizens. If any of you have gone to that ceremony, very moving, very interesting thing to do, but it's all morning. Then somehow they made their way back across the bay and then to City Hall and had the right paperwork, and we had huge lines at our voting center that day and stood in line and voted. 50 people did that. The other counties also had people come out. I still get kind of choked up thinking about them. So how do we scale that up? Both to want to become citizens and to vote. This Saturday, if you come to San Francisco, I'll have my Uncle Sam hat on and all my stuff, because we're doing what we call a pre-citizenship event that a different department in our city is doing. And these people are going to have all of the tools given to them to become citizens. If they start on Saturday, they should be able to be citizens by November to vote. So we're going to be there. We can't register them, of course, but we're going to give them the information, and this is what you do, and this is the website, and all of that stuff. Thank you. And so to finish this up and to share some LA ideas, we have both a PowerPoint and a speaker here from the Los Angeles Department of Elections.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Navarez. I am from the Registrar Recorder County Clerk of Los Angeles County. I oversee our Governmental and Legislative Affairs Division. I think I've known about this panel longer than anyone, so thank you to my fellow panelists. I started to get nervous when my fellow panelists started falling off sick, and I thought I was next. So thank you for having us. We're excited to be here and kind of share some of the things that LA County is doing in this space, and really, as Jill said, partnerships are critical, and hearing what my fellow panelists are doing and what your organizations are doing and other jurisdictions are doing is really critical to helping us reach that great unengaged. So I think when most people think of election administrators and civic engagement, the first thing they think is voter reg. And yes, voter reg is still absolutely vitally important, but I think what we've found is that we have to get past voter registration. We have to get into ways of engaging folks in the way that they need to be engaged. The Secretary mentioned today, Motor Voter will definitely help in that regard. LA County has approximately 1.2 to 1.3 eligible but unregistered voters in the county. So just automating that system with the DMV and bridging that gap for us is a huge step in the right direction. But even further, one of the reasons why the county and our department advocated so vehemently for that bill was the process changes. because we're not focused on that manual registration process and that manual, getting out there and getting folks to register in that manual way, we can turn our efforts into a more productive, in certain extents, voter education and voter engagement efforts. And we're really excited. Hopefully implementation happens soon for that, so we can get going on that. But voter turnout in the state, and particularly in LA County, is still a big concern. The California Community Engagement Project just released a recent report that I think California is 43rd worst in voter turnout. And so how do we address that? How do we get to people where they're at? And what we've realized is that we can't just sit back and wait for folks to come to us to figure out how to access our system, is that we have to go to them. And in a county as large as Los Angeles, 10 million residents, about 5 million registered voters, and we're one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse, in terms of languages, in terms of cultures, in terms of socioeconomic backgrounds and religions. So how do we do that? As one office, yes, we have a dedicated division that's focused on doing this, but we need partners. We need partnerships. We need organizations who are getting involved in these communities, and we need to talk to them. We need to see what they're doing. We need to see what other cities are doing to really figure out how best to engage this great population of unengaged citizens. One of the projects or avenues that we've taken in LA County is to create the Community Voter Outreach Committee. I think several of you in here are actually on that committee. It's a really successful committee where we bring together all of our stakeholders, organizations for immigrant rights, organizations for language rights, for accessibility rights. The political parties are there. Our city clerks are there. It's a way for us to collaborate and communicate on the most effective ways to engage our communities. Again, we're not able to reach all the people on our own, but we have to be able to find ways to connect with these people in really effective and authentic ways. So this community meets on a quarterly basis. The public is welcome. If your organization isn't a part of Civic, reach out to me afterwards. We'll get you involved. It's really a great way for us to hear what other people are doing, to hear new strategies, innovative strategies, and really figure out how best to serve our joint populations. Next thing I want to talk about is some high school and college voter outreach. And this is just one component of a greater strategy to really target particular groups where we know we've talked about the high propensity of millennial voters that are growing and communities of color. One effective way we've looked at, and the Secretary of State has been a big partner and advocate on this as well, is starting young, is talking to these folks in high school, these kids in high school, helping them understand the importance of their vote and what matters to them and the different ways that they can engage the system. And we've found that a really powerful technique is to work with these students so that they can, again, work with their colleagues, their peers, because when you hear from a peer about why they like to vote or why voting is important to their family or their community, it's really a powerful tool to engage more. And now that we have voter or pre-voter registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, again, that is just another avenue that we have to engage these students early on. Colleges, again, are another way that we really try to get out and focus on communities where they're just not coming out and voting, unfortunately. Jay brought up a fantastic point regarding folks on probation and folks in our county jails. One program that I really wanted to highlight today was our Voting While Incarcerated program. In California, there's a lot of people who are currently in our facilities who are in there on non-felony offenses or are awaiting trial. Those folks are eligible to vote. So we're working with the Sheriff's Department and community organizations within our community to get in there and to present these folks this information, to help them register to vote, to provide opportunities for them to actually vote while they're in jail. Again, giving empowerment to folks who have been disenfranchised by a variety of different reasons. So getting in there in really creative ways and giving people that most fundamental right of democracy has been really a powerful tool for us to engage these folks. And just kind of finishing off the thing about it, partnerships and empowerment. Some problems are just hard. We have a huge growing millennial population that is registered and not voting. Communities of color, the same thing. We have a voting system that is obsolete and we're having to address. So we need to do some innovative strategies. And I want to just quickly touch on some of the things we're doing to really get into these areas and try to find effective solutions for them. One of them is using data science. We have a vast voter file that we know, there's a big database of all these voters, but digging into who they are, where they live, what are their demographics, and we're able to target and verify that yes, the millennials are the largest growing population in our voter file that's disengaged. Latinos and communities of color as well, and we're able to identify that and identify where specifically these folks live in the county. So we can target our outreach and our campaign strategies in really focused ways that we've never been able to do before, and it's really exciting. We're launching a Facebook campaign this June that's using these data science techniques to figure out those low propensity communities and do targeted, specific outreach to these groups. Again, people have to have that inherent desire to vote, but we can't, as election administrators or folks who work in these offices, can't put measures on the ballot. We can't put candidates on the ballot, but we can engage our voters. We can help them understand where we're at, how they can engage with our system and meet them in ways that they need to be met. And finally, our sort of most ambitious civic engagement effort is our voting systems assessment project. This is a project that is completely redesigning the county's voting system and really voting experience and putting the voter at the center of that. So not being dictated by a vendor-specific solution or what the regulations say, but what do our voters want? What do folks who don't speak English as a first language, how do they access our system? How do folks with disabilities access our system? And we're using a human-centered design approach where we've, since this project started in 2009, engaged over 3,000 voters and really figured out how best to create a system that is responsive to them and put voters back at the center of this. And so I think just to close, I think hearing from all of you on how the different techniques that you're doing is vitally important for us to engage our community better. We're always looking for new strategies, new partnerships, new ideas, and really welcome that opportunity because there are a lot of folks who are currently living in our communities that aren't engaged, and we need to find really authentic ways to engage them in important and authentic ways to get them part of our system. So I'll open it up for discussion and kick it back to you, Jill, but thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into, weren't they great? A perfect segue into your turn. Okay. No, 20 minutes for questions. So, come on, don't be shy. Does anyone have a question for the panel as a whole or any individual that you need to clarify? And since you're not mic'd, and I don't think we... I have a good voice. Oh, we have a microphone person. Thank you, I didn't realize that.
Better.
Thank you.
Great. First of all, I want to just thank all the panelists. I'm Rosalind Gold. I'm a colleague of Angelica's at NALEO. And I have a question based on something we've learned from our Great Unengaged work at NALEO to the other panelists. So one of the things we learned about people, Latinos who are not fully engaged, is that there's a fairly significant group that actually is interested in politics, is very up on the issues, but does not trust the electoral system to get the kind of changes that they need to see in their community. So it's not like they don't know politics or don't interested in it, but they don't necessarily feel that elected officials will be accountable to them if they participate. And then the other thing we also learned is that for Latinos, some of the best messengers are family members. So, for example, I like to joke, if your mother tells you to vote, you will be very much more likely to vote than if Eva Longoria tells you to vote or Jennifer Lopez tells you to vote. And people like school teachers, community leaders are messengers that are also very powerful. So what I wanted to ask the other panelists are, what are messages or messengers that you have found in the communities that you have worked with that you think most resonate with getting people to become fuller participants?
You want to know?
Sure. I mean, I can a little bit. We have a couple of organizations this year that are going to be using the church pastors as messengers, and people like creating like kind of like I said, I think I mentioned earlier, like captains in their church that are then like you choose 10 people in your church that you are responsible for turning out to vote. So using that kind of trusted person. We kind of just have to create a culture of voting. Like I liken it to, there was a time years ago when we didn't recycle, and then they started bringing these like trash cans to our houses, and we had to start recycling, and it was just kind of like, why would I do that? I have a trash can. But now, like my parents live in a city in another state where they don't have recycling, and it pains me to like throw something cardboard in the trash can. And it's just kind of, we have to start moving towards that culture of voting, like that is just part of the culture, and it's baby steps, but that's something that we, it's just finding those trusted people in the communities where you can work with that person and say, you're responsible for turning out 10 people to vote, like, and finding multiple people like that, and then following up and saying, like, here's your report of your 10 people, here's, what did you do that worked versus this person that only turned out 2 and you turned out 7, or, just kind of like, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's a process, I think.
And Jay, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
So I'll be the radical one. So I used to work for PICO. We organize churches. So yeah, that's a great idea. I would just take it back, man. Power for me is in the relationship. And I don't care if there's a black president, brown president, yellow president. I don't care if you pass a bunch of different laws that affect criminal justice. I don't care if you even if we like have a pathway to citizenship, if that doesn't translate to someone's life and in their home, if they're still starving and their brother's still going to jail. I mean, we passed Prop 47, one of the most historic legislations that California has seen, right, in terms of criminal justice reform. But yes, people are still going to jail, right? Barack Obama's president, but yet, 1 in 5 black men will see a prison cell. So the trust you're talking about, right? It needs to translate, like the policy and the people we put in office needs to translate into actual change on the ground in households. For California for Safety and Justice, we organize crime survivors.
Can you repeat that?
California for Safety and Justice, we organize crime survivors. We organize crime victims.
Survivors.
Right? We organize crime victims. And what we realized, in our mission to do some piece of legislation to pass, in California around criminal justice reform, we realized that there was a lot of people in jail, and California did all this work to try to send people out of state to come in compliance with the court order to reduce prison population, right? And so we start to do our research. We peel back the onion as to why people are in jail, right? Why so many people are in prison. And it was because of tough on crime era, right? With the super predator frame, calling kids super predators, the 3 strikes, and that narrative was being pushed by the DAs speaking on behalf of crime victims. So we began to go deeper. Okay, so if the crime victims wanted these tough on crime policies, let's go talk to crime victims. So we surveyed 2,600 crime victims in California, and something astonishing happened. Crime victims live in the hood. And they were saying these policies that were being passed weren't being passed by us. And we're the one that they affect the most. Right? So my point is that, people distrust the system because the very system that is put in place to protect us oppresses us and takes people out of our neighborhoods. Right? So how can I expect someone to vote for, John Smith or Proposition whatever if their father isn't in the home, if their kid is failing in school and been suspended twice and they're only in the second grade? Right? How can we expect people to vote if we're not reaching out, like you said, year in and day in and day out? It's not just around election time. We have to be more transformative in our practices. I love what the LA is doing. I think we talked with Joe Paul at Shields for Families, right? About engaging people and not even talking about voting, but talking about what is your issue? What are you going through? Let's talk about that first before you even get to voting, because voting is not high on people's priorities when people are out there dying in the street.
I would also just quickly add that a lot of it, too, is educating. I know some of our partners that work in refugee communities, they care about things like, how am I going to get to work? Does the bus route go by my house? Voting for someone for president isn't going to get you better bus routes, so it's educating the community about who the change makers are and what, why you need to come out and win by 50% or more. So it's a lot of that too is working with those communities and educating who those change makers are. And it might not even be electeds. It could be, other change makers.
Wow, this is great. I saw your hand up first. Gentleman in the light blue shirt. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that might be all we have.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And I'm really inspired by what I'm hearing. Can you speak a little bit to, we're talking about revolution, but we're still using the systems that have oppressed people who need to be liberated. Can you speak to how you are using the system? Because like here we use PDI, right, in California. But in San Diego, PDI says that there are only 24,000 registered black voters in the whole county, which we know is not true. And so if we're trying to turn out these people who need to be liberated, if we're trying to do the work of getting them information, even if it's not about voting, our systems don't allow us to fully realize the potential that exists in our community. So can you tell us some of the systems you use and how you push back against some of these notions that Latinos, blacks, and Asians aren't voting, they're not turning out to city council meetings, they're not making effective change in their communities to be a part of the system?
I'll take a crack at that. One of the systems we use, obviously, I talked about is the voter registration file, and that's just straight data. So we see who's registered, where they're registered, if they voted, how often they voted, and again, that allows us to see who these folks are who are voting, and try to target them specifically. But yeah.
That's my exact point, because the voter registration file does tell us who they are, but it doesn't tell us who they are.
Exactly.
Right.
If I'm a black man voting in a white suburb, it tells people that I'm white.
Right.
It doesn't say that a black man lives in Rancho Bernardo.
Correct.
Or lives in Palo Alto. It says that Wilson in Palo Alto is white. So how do we really organize? Because we're not all poor. We don't all live in the hood. And we still care about those issues that are impacting the very people that Jay is talking about.
Well, I think, again, if I to finish the point was, again, the partnership. So we've talked a lot about immigrant right organizations. We had a fantastic meeting with Angelica from Chirla to find out what are the issues that these specific communities have. Not every community has the same issues, and I think for us it's figuring out what each community's issues are and finding ways to connect with them, to hear their concerns on, some immigrants are afraid to engage the system because they're afraid they're going to make a mistake, and we need to figure out why that is. To work with these groups to figure out why they feel this way and how we can provide better education so they understand, there is no mistake. And, one of the things we've done is do focus groups for legal permanent residents are in the state of California are allowed to act as poll workers. And that's one great way that they can engage the system and figure out how it works. But we don't just want to tell them how to do it. We want to hear from them what their challenges are. So we have focus groups to hear what these different communities' concerns are. And I think if we don't go out of our way to listen to these communities and hear what their concerns are, again, I'm not going to minimize Jay's point on the policy. As an election administrative office, there's only so many things we can do.
Yeah.
And I think, just to be clear, so we're trying to do those things that we can do well and figure out, if we're not doing them well, how can we do them better? And how can we reach out to these groups, these specific communities, in ways that resonate with the particular folks who we're trying to reach?
Yeah, just really, really quick. It's not the system's job. It's not the function of the system to do outreach on a day-to-day basis. It's the people on the ground, the organizations that actually do the outreach to actually build those relationships, right? And I think to your point, we can push them as much as they can go. But then, man, I don't want to talk to I wouldn't bring you to the neighborhood and say, hey, man, teach them about voting. No, I'm going to bring you to a select group and say, hey, train the trainer. So they can go and, right? So it's the messenger, what you're talking about, it's the messenger, right? And it's up to us on the ground to build these relationships, these lasting relationships, and build these trusts. And that's power, right? Because power is organized people and money. And organized people is what we're trying to do, right? To build power.
And I would just add a couple of things. What you spoke to is very true, especially for the community we're trying to reach. We're limited to the data we have available, and our community is very much not a part of those roles, right? And the other challenge we have is, through the systems that we use, we can't contact cell phones in the same way that we can contact home numbers. This generation of voters that we're trying to reach are younger. They don't have landlines, right? So a lot of the work that we do is about information gathering and working with these lists and trying to find support so we can hire data people, right, that are actually on our staff to give us access to that information so that we can analyze it in a way and use it to our advantage. How do we work with the system, the equipment, the limited resources that we have to think about non-traditional ways of collecting this information that doesn't involve relying on just voter files that may not have all the information about the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So.
There was a question at this table. And if we can keep the questions really brief too.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I think one thing that I'd like to hear from the panel is, I think, the unspoken, which is that for years and years, there's been a purposeful, very intentional disinvitation to participate. And also there's a very narrative that's anti-government, in every form, from the school, your schools, to all that is government, local, city. It's bad, bad, bad. It's a narrative that's out there that really counters participation. And so I just feel like, speak to the issue of, there is another agenda that seeks for us not to participate, and there is a narrative that says all of this is bad, don't participate. How do you counter that as well?
You're asking me, you're looking at me. So
I'm asking the panel, whoever can answer, and I'm also looking at you because I feel like that's also part of the.
And I think it goes back to what my dear sister said in the back, is the mistrust. So we have to create if there is a dominant narrative out there, obviously, and some of us are organizers in here, right? We have to create a counter narrative. And how do you do that? You organize. You build relationships. You use the existing landscape, the churches. You use the schools, right? But again, it's difficult. It's hard. I mean, it's so hard. You're on the ground, so it's difficult to walk into these neighborhoods and see a family that had their the male deported, and the mother is supporting three kids. And you're telling her that her vote counts, right? So it's hard. We're talking about real people. We throw out these terms and these numbers, but we're talking about lives here. I don't have that answer. I don't, and hopefully one of you do, because
Anybody got the
it's
answer?
something that we struggle with on a daily basis as movement builders, right?
It is a fabulous question, and I think we all do our
Again,
little
in
pieces.
our role as the election administrator, how to find authentic ways to engage people is difficult. When we see so many people who aren't engaged in the system, we need to try to find ways to build that trust. And I think communication and speaking with these groups is one effective way of trying to build that trust, trying to understand that we're here to assist them in our one specific role as the county registrar. Until you do that, I mean, no one's going to come out. Like you said, no one's going to come out and vote, but we have to continue to try. When in 2014, less than 20% of registered voters in LA County voted, that means 20% of registered voters decided everything that was on that election, 20%. And so that is, as an election administrator's office, that's frustrating. But from a public policy perspective, and not to get too far over, that's also frustrating, that 20% of the electorate is choosing. So again, from our role, partnerships, empowerment, trying to find innovative ways to do this. I know that with this particular panel that there is a lot of concern, and rightfully so, regarding what's going on in the world today. So we could do the best we can and try to build these relationships, build trust, try to find those people in the communities who we can work with, and hopefully build those bridges again. I mean, that's a tough way to answer the question, but that's how I would address it.
I would say this. So true organizing, right? Now, I always come back to organizing. Building relationships, doing one-to-one, servicing issues. Then you go into research, right? With the same group of people, the same group of bodies, you go into a neighborhood, right? And then you gather people and you hear what the issues are. And these, after you talk to so many people over and over and over in community, you realize, okay, these are the top issues. And then you work with that same group of people and say, okay, we are going to change this issue. We're going to learn together. So you don't go in and say, well, we need your vote. No, you go in and say, what are the issues in this community, right? And you show them a model to actually change things, and then you walk with them to the action, to the actual policy. So the policy isn't coming from top down, it's actually coming from up, right? The School of Berkeley Public Policy, they came up with, it's so hard to say, participatory policy analysis, right? It's basically what I just told you, right? Using the people to create laws, and then walking those people through the process. And that is how you engage folks in actual getting to the polls. It's not just by one policy that is sexy, right? It's actually making policies that are ugly and that no one else likes, right? But it's coming from the actual people, and that's how you engage them.
I would also say to celebrate your victories. Like if you, as a community, worked to clean up a park or get a park made or whatever, have a party at the park with all of your organizers that worked, and we follow up with but once we've gone to you and we've asked you to vote and you come out and vote, we will send you our partners will send you a thank you note for voting, and like just keeping people engaged and celebrating the good stuff too, so that it's slowly, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight.
I appreciate that. I think I was talking, because we all do that, but I think there's a bigger fight, and I feel like we're still getting to the boutique answer, but I appreciate it.
I want to check in with Sylvia. So she's giving me a stop sign.
We have 6 minutes.
We have 6 minutes. Should we keep taking questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's sit till we're done, right? So instead of closing comments, we're going to hear more from you. So very quickly, we'll try to get a couple more questions in. Everybody's got 1 minute here. Go, you're next. Yeah.
I don't know if this,
There you go.
My name is Kenya Parham. I'm a political strategist based in Los Angeles and also the associate director of the African American Civic Engagement Project. So I just wanted to offer to the panel that when we're having conversations about civic engagement, sometimes these terms that we use, particularly when we're trying to speak to disenfranchised communities, can be really high level. And I think that, I'm also a millennial. And so I think one of the things that we've tried to incorporate at ACEP is understanding that people need to know that civic engagement needs to be part of their daily walk. And what does that look like? And how can you encourage civic engagement on a daily basis? What does that mean from the time that you leave your house to when you come back home again? What are the many ways in which you engage in civic engagement? Making it plain for people. So I just wanted to ask you all, are there any practices that you have in your own organizations that you all are kind of breaking down, the minutia of what civic engagement is and how it can be very, very plain for people, and how it can translate to becoming more involved in your communities, for kids to know who they can go to for help, for folks to want to find a park and an open space to be able to regenerate, stuff like that.
And maybe that will serve as our 1-minute close. So everybody can try to answer that in a minute. It's a huge question.
I started first, so let's go.
Sure. I feel like everyone's looking at me now. I think that's extremely important, and I want to take it back to what we were talking about in terms of working on this in cycles, right? For us, the funding comes in cycles, and that's unfortunate because that means that we move our energies to other areas of our work on non-election years, and then 2016 is here, and hey, everyone, stop what you're doing. We're back on election work, right? So for us, it's about seeing opportunities in the way we are engaging with our community on the other instances. And I can speak to, the majority of the work that we do is around citizenship. And so, yes, there's a big push, and there's an obvious connection between citizenship and voting. A lot of our applicants, especially now, are, anecdotally I can share, right, are interested in becoming citizens now because it means that they can turn out to vote in 2016, right? But during the times where our communities aren't under attack, how do we make citizenship while they're deciding this because of a financial reason or because they want to bring other people in? How do we make sure that they are still thinking about the fact that citizenship is going to impact their every single day life, and that is civic participation? So, sorry, I saw the stop sign.
I would say in terms of the language, I know that's something that government always struggles with, is putting things in plain language that people can understand, and not only plain language and the way people can understand it, but in other languages that people can understand it. And again, that goes back to reaching out to our partners in these communities that can help us work on some of these materials that we use or they would use to outreach to their particular community. So again, I think government has often, here's the form, here's the flyer, push it down, but to really take the time on what that flyer means. How do you understand what these terms mean? Really down to the term. What does this word mean? Can we find a different way to effectively reach out to people? So quickly, it's partnerships, it's reaching out to the communities who are on the ground and finding authentic ways to reach out to these folks.
I would echo the partnership. It's kind of hard for me to answer because I work with organizations and then they work with the people. But those, like, understanding that that your school lunches are part of civic participation. Having like kosher meals or halal meals is part of the civic engagement. Being able bike lanes or cleaning up parks and all of that stuff. And all of our organizations do that kind of stuff, and just keep it reminding your community that this is part of being part of the community, and then that there's a ladder of engagement, and it does start down there at sweeping your driveway or whatever.
Great. 1 minute.
I'll turn it off. Yeah, I've been talking too much, so I'll turn it off. For me, it's about love and justice. The word justice, it's a Latin concept word is equitas, meaning symmetry, same, right? I was training in LA, a group of crime survivors, mothers who lost victims to violent crime, mothers who lost sons to violent crimes, and mothers whose sons were the perpetrators, right? And we were going around the room, and I was asking people to stand up, state their name, and what are their justice word, right? One word to describe justice. And we went around the room, we got to this 8-year-old kid, and I always include kids in everything, right? This 8-year-old kid, and we got to him, everybody's looking and smiling at him, and he looks up to the sky, and he looks down, and he says, spaghetti, right? And we all laughed, of course, and I asked him, spaghetti, why do you say spaghetti? He says, not any spaghetti, but my mom's spaghetti, because it's good, and she cooks it with love, right? just to think that that kid, justice for him was synonymous with love and food and his mother and being at home. And I think that if we keep that in mind when we do outreach, that people are people and not just numbers and unlikely voters and high propensity voters, but people are people and families are families, and they're hurting and they're traumatized and oppressed, I think we'll be all right.
Well, that's wonderful. I want to thank the Future of California Voting for having this great conversation, which we can all continue on at lunch and over the next few days. One thing that, of course, once we engage them, we have to keep them engaged. But that's for next year's conference, I guess. So thank you all very much.
Can we give Jill a round of applause, please? That's amazing.
Thank you all stepping up. Thank you all for coming. And how'd we do, Sylvia? Thank you, Sylvia. She kept us on track.
Awesome. Yeah.